Here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
PFENNING is in the house. Jay, welcome back.
Wes Tankersley. Thank you for having me back on the Shaping Success podcast.
Hey.
Shaping Success show.
Yeah. Well, hey, I appreciate you being here. We talk every week. We do One Drink Wednesday every week. We changed the time. So we're going to do it at, what did we decide? 7 o'clock Pacific time, 8 o'clock Mountain time. It's so confusing because we're in different time zones right now, but in like 3 months, we'll be in the same time zone. It's kind of annoying, but that's the way it works. Lucky you don't have daylight savings time.
Yeah, lucky for us. It's still very confusing, especially when you start dealing with, like, I'm not good at math, so I can do, 1 plus 1, but I can't do, 1 plus 1 plus 1.
Right.
And so once you start mixing in Central Time and whatever else comes after that, Eastern, then things get screwy. But I can handle Mountain and Pacific because I only have to count 1 hour either way. So it's either I'm on the same time as Wes or I'm an hour behind.
Yeah, and so we've been doing this One Drink Wednesday, probably about 3 months now. And it's interesting because that is kind of the issue we've found is that the time zone is just, it kind of throws people off. They're either just getting home from dinner in Arizona or they're just getting done with dinner in Idaho. So we're going to change it up a little bit and we're going to make it so that you have a little bit more time to join us because we want lots of people there. We want you to follow us. We want you to hang out with us, bring your drink and just come hang out.
Yeah, so, it's not even just dinner. Some people are still working. Or they're on their commute as people have returned to work. And so, we probably both get the DMs where people are like, oh, shoot, I forgot, or I was on my way home, or I tried to get on, but I couldn't. And so I think moving it forward is just a better move. And plus, sometimes I got a lot of stuff going on in the background. People are yelling and screaming. Our dinner, we eat early. So that'll give me a good time for my food to settle, and maybe it becomes 2 Drink Wednesday. I don't know.
It does happen sometimes. So what's going on in Arizona, man? It's I was telling you before the show, it's a little bit warmer here probably today than it is there. And you got the pool in the backyard. You planning on hitting the pool this afternoon?
I have kind of this weird thing because we have a party pool. I think you've seen the pool. It's probably 25 or 30 feet by like 12 across and 6 foot at its deepest point. And so in the summers, it gets really hot. I mean, it's like bathwater hot. And so it's not really that refreshing. But when everybody comes over, extended family, usually it's not family and friends. It's just weird. If friends came over, I would get in the pool. But if it's family, kids running around, yelling and screaming, music that I don't really care about that much, and it just gets kind of crowded. And then it's like, you got everyone's oils, and you don't know who's doing stuff in the pool, and it's just not fun. So I almost never get in.
Well, it's chlorine, right? It's not the saltwater kind, your pool?
Right, yeah. We have the freshwater pool.
Oh, it is a problem with
the saltwater pool because people tell you the saltwater pools are better, but they're not really. I think they're better at first, but the thing is you have to make sure there's no metal within 10 feet circumference of your pool because it just having it in the air just eventually starts rusting everything.
Yeah. Is that something that you see in Arizona a lot? I wonder if they have. I think that at the Airbnb we were at last time, it was a saltwater one. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what the mix is, but I do know. I mean, I have friends that have saltwater pools, and they swear by them. But they're kind of some of those people who like to show you that they have something you don't, so you don't really know if it's really good or it's just them rubbing it in your face. So. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the podcast. Since the last time you've been on, it's been, I don't know, 4 or 5 months now. Yeah, it's been a while. And you had, at one point, your show was every 10 days. Is that right?
Before 21, it was every 2 weeks. So I tried to do it every 14 days. Sometimes it slid 16. But toward the last quarter, probably midway through 2020, I made sure that came out every Monday morning.
Well, I was just going to ask you because I know what's going on. It's kind of like there's 2 different shows now, right? So 1 week you're doing a short show and the other week you're doing a long show. Can you tell us a little bit of the difference between the 2 of those?
It's still HardParking podcast, but instead of creating an entirely different podcast, I decided to kind of piggyback on the same efforts because we don't need to do twice the work for the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And so now we call it HardParking Podcast and then HardParking Podcast, the other side of the wheel. And the difference is the other side of the wheel is a shorter version of the podcast, and it's more vehicle focused, more vehicle content, whether it's news, maybe the guest is local to Arizona or to the region. And it also has different segments, and having different segments kind of gives me the opportunity to introduce a chance of different segment sponsors, you know? And
Right.
it also gives it a change up from the normal show. The normal show is some of that, but without as much automotive news. And the normal show leads off with usually a society and culture segment, as you know, but for the people watching this, don't know. And that's when I get into some of the topics of every day. As you know, I try to stay away from the politics. I try to stay away from a lot of the really hot things going on unless I have my own personal opinion that I want to lend to it in my own perspective. And people seem to enjoy that. And it's kind of weird that I think probably 60% of the people who listen to the podcast tune in for the society and culture section.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You've always dubbed it as the non-automotive automotive podcast because the majority of what you do talk about, I feel, is this society and culture. So bringing in the other side of the wheel allowed you to be able to kind of talk a little bit more car stuff. You did have one episode a couple weeks ago with some guy who was down visiting you, and it wasn't really very automotive other than the longest rental car of the week show in a while, right?
Yeah, it's this thing. This is guy that I met through the podcasting community, which is, I guess it's okay to say now. Maybe 10 years ago, I met this guy online and we had drinks together, and then he came over and I invited him up to my casting studio here. But yeah, he came down from Idaho area. He looks a lot like you, talks a lot like you.
Oh, that was a
he
good
likes
time.
to drink, and so we had a couple pops, and I dropped a couple tablets in his liquor, and yeah, he was an open book, man.
Oh, that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. I was glad to make it down there. It's really cool to be sitting in a studio space with someone else who knows, has the same kind of aspirations and things like that. One of the things that, as long as this relationship that we've had with each other, we've been talking to each other pretty much daily for the most part, unless one of us goes on vacation or something like that. You've always been pretty successful in getting sponsorships, and you talked about how it gave you a level of chances to get more sponsors when you moved to the weekly show. Can you talk a little bit? I know that a lot of people think that monetization is like when you talk to a podcaster and they're just getting started, they always talk about, oh, I'm going to make money doing this right away, right? And then we get these people who just fall off. They do 5 shows, they're done. They didn't make any money. It's not worth it to them. But you've always been pretty successful in getting sponsorships and getting people to come to your show. Can you talk a little bit about the process that works, how that works for you?
Sure, and that's an excellent, I think, thing to talk about, because you can take the model that I use and apply it toward anything that you're doing. So if you want to be a chef, you want to be a mechanic, you want to be a YouTuber, it doesn't matter what it is you want to do. It's the same core principles, the same core approach. And I think where the success has come is that, number one, we'll go back to people who do a handful of episodes and drop off. Do the reps. If you want somebody to invest their money and their time in you, show them why it's worth it to them. Because nobody wants to give you a handout. And that's the case with no matter what it is you're doing. I think I had an episode where I compared it to door-to-door sales or multi-level marketing, or selling candy bars as a kid. We don't get that in the modern era where little kids come to the door and they want you to buy their candy bars, or they want you to buy the little overpriced tins of jelly beans so that they can go to Uruguay for the summer. But what happens is, mom or dad take it to work and they sell all your candy for you. They get all their friends to sign up, maybe your family and friends. You go to your next door neighbors. Once you start getting 2 or 3 streets over, they don't care about you. They don't know you. They want to know, is it a value for them? Like, it's not what they can do for you to help you go on your trip. It's what your product can do for them. And it's the same way when it comes to anything. We'll use podcasting as what we're talking about. So if you record a podcast, you have no idea what you're doing. You don't know anything about audio. You don't know anything about video. You don't know anything about the hardware and software. Maybe you don't even listen to podcasts, which baffles me, but there's still people who don't listen to podcasts. But as soon as you record your first one, you go out there and you say, hey, I'm ready to get monetized. What are people doing? I want to get paid for this. Well, you haven't done anything. Why would someone want to pay you? And it's not personal. It's logical. So first thing you have to do is do the reps. Show people, because there's always going to be someone kind of watching you from a distance. And that's kind of what it was with me. I was thinking, hey, I've come in with the car world and I'm not really popular in the car game. But there's enough people who know who I am because I did sponsorships with my car and did a bunch of other stuff. And I pitched to them. I said, hey, guys, me and this other guy, we're doing a podcast. We're both into cars. We both drive NSXs. Because a lot of people look at the logo and they're like, what is that? It's actually two cars backed up. They're hard parked, right? So I pitched out to a lot of the people who were used to working with me. I said, hey, we're doing this podcast, looking for sponsors. What's up? And most people just were crickets. I was like, okay. So there's two ways to think about that. Screw you. You don't believe in me. Or I need to work harder and show you why it's worth your time. And it's the same thing with back when I was doing a car build. You don't decide to build your car and say, hey, I need sponsors. Meanwhile, you have no social media presence. You don't go to any car shows because you don't just have to have social media presence. But if that's what they're looking for, then you better get going. Right. You can't buy followers because if you do, people can tell immediately what they're looking at. I had Johnny Valencia on, who used to be the main guy at Michelin for the social media and marketing. And he said on my podcast, hey, first thing you know immediately when you look at somebody if they're full of crap. You have to show them that maybe you have a history, or maybe show them your plans. Maybe your proposal, right?
Yep.
So we tried all that, and people weren't as interested. And I go, okay, well, I already knew that we could get better. We needed to be better. We needed to sound better. We needed to have better content. I think our first couple episodes were fun, but they really were too niche. So we needed to open it up. And after I started doing more and I dropped him, my original co-host, I sent out another round and said, hey, everybody, still doing the podcast. It's been 6 months. Who wants to be a part of it? And here's what I did. And I think this is why I was able to start capturing people, because I knew that a lot of people are going to look at your numbers. I don't have a network like you guys do where you're getting like TVPPN people. You have a bunch of shows and people, you have all eyes on you. It's it should be an easier sell for a logical business owner that wants to get their stuff out there. It's easy. It should be easy. It's not easy. Nothing's easy, but it should be easy if someone's thinking, what can this do for my company? Not this person's trying to get me to pay for their stuff, So some of it's mental, right? It's your approach. But I said, okay, I'm not getting a ton of downloads because there's 2 million podcasts out there. I'm one of 2 million. I may be one of 10,000 in automotive. I'm not special. I don't care how good I sound. I'm not special. And so instead of saying, okay, we'll just say 100 downloads an episode, that's not going to mean anything to them, because when you do the research, people get paid for 10,000, 20,000, 2 cents for every 20,000 or whatever the numbers are. So I hit them with a flat fee. So, hey guys, how about you invest in me for 10 episodes? And for 10 episodes, I'm only going to charge you this much. And honestly, I think I started off with $50, right? So $5 an episode. I'm not trying to live off of it. I had a job already, but I wanted to get better, and I wanted people to believe in me, and it also helps them, right?
Yeah.
Because I have reach. And so by doing that, it's an exchange, right? It's not what can you do for me, it's what can we do for each other. And this may be different from a lot of people, but I took that as, okay, now that you're investing in me, I feel responsible, and now I owe you. And so that also helps me keep going. So maybe there's a week where I'm like, oh, I don't really feel like recording, or man, I don't have much time. I got to figure something out. Well, okay, well, this company just paid me to promote their product on my show.
Yeah, they're relying on you.
They're relying on me. Yeah. And it's a commitment. It's a commitment I've carried forward. Going back to the car world, right? I want someone to sponsor me with wheels. But what does that mean? I don't want you to give me wheels, but if you could sell me wheels for less than I would normally have to pay, because I don't want you to lose money, you're doing me a favor. I can help advertise for you. And the agreement says, okay, well, I need to go to 10 car shows in the next year, and I need to promote on social media. I need to use their hashtags. Done deal, right?
Yep.
So it's kind of the same deal when it comes to podcasts. And so I told them, I was like, look, I'm not going to be like, hey, this is sponsor. I'm going to use Dress Up Bolts because they came with me from the car world and no longer part of the show, but they were with me for a while. And I thanked them for it. And I still have their products on my car, and I still wear their t-shirt. But with Dress Up Bolts, I'm not going to say at the end of the show, oh, thank you, Dress Up Bolts, for sponsoring the show. I said, I'm going to give you your own segment. How about the Builder's Corner? Because people buy your product to build on their car. So now the Builder's Corner is sponsored by Dress Up Bolts. And then I say a 2 or 3 sentence thing for them. go to dressupbolts.com, follow them on Instagram. I mean, they haven't been part of the show for a year, but I still know. Go to dressupbolts.com. They're getting a free plug right now.
Right.
Find out their fitment. Tell them the HardParking podcast sent you, whatever the case.
Yep.
And so I just kind of kept doing that. I kept adding segments. I said, hey, you want to be the title sponsor. And where did I get that from? I get that from other podcasts that I would listen to. Not even cars, sports. I love sports. It's a sports podcast. And you say, this podcast is sponsored by Dollar Shave Club. I was like, well, that's kind of cool. And it makes me feel more relevant. And it makes it feel like I'm doing something good. And I'm charging a lot of money for this thing, but it makes me feel like, I think I've said this before. Deion Sanders once said, you have to look good to play good, because he gets all G'd up, You got to play good to get paid good, So being the part, right? Talking the talk, walking the walk, having the right equipment, doing the right commitment, doing the right homework, dedicating to where every show was better than the previous show, shows your sponsors and your listeners that you're serious about what you're doing. Once you do that, it's a little easier. It's not easy, but it's a little easier. So now when I go for a title sponsor, I say, hey, I will put your name on the podcast, your logo, as long as you're part of the sponsorship. Charge more, not a lot, but people jumped on it. So I've had a title sponsor for over 2 years. And then I'm at the point now, and again, I'm not making money, but I'm offsetting the costs. Or my sponsorship dollars will pay for a new microphone to where my wife doesn't yell at me for wanting to buy a new microphone. It's a win-win.
You just sneak and buy one without her knowing. She doesn't know. I mean, my wife has no clue, but whatever.
Well, you do the whole receipt thing, right? It's the same thing with car parts. It's like, oh, look, it costs $29.99. I saw during Christmas time, I saw a meme where it's like, you order a part, you order something expensive, and they go, for an additional $5, we'll write you a custom receipt you show your spouse.
That's funny. That's perfect.
Yeah. So anyway, that's basically how I did the whole sponsorship thing. And again, I mean, I have a full-time job. It'd be nice, to turn this into something. But I got into podcasting not for the money. It's kind of funny. I got into podcasting because no one in my family wants to hear me talk. There's people out there who do like hearing my opinion on things. Yeah. And being a non-automotive automotive podcast, if this allows me to get media credentials, to go to car shows early, other events early. I just interviewed a guy, and he'll be on the show soon. Maybe by the time this comes out, he will already been on, but he's a pretty significant guy up in Detroit. And his publicist said, hey, thanks for doing the interview. Let me know when it's out. If you want media credentials, let me know if you come up to this event. I mean, that's why I do this.
Right.
Because to me, that's cool. I'm paying for the plane ticket, lodging, all that stuff. But if I can get that pass to get in there early and get some cool stuff done, so that's really why I did it. Out of the spirit and the fun. And then, of course, the sponsorship stuff just helped keep me going.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to do this more often. I wish we had a little bit more time here, but we're going to have to cut her off. Can you tell us where we can find you? And I think, like I said, before you do that, because I know it's scrolling across the bottom there too, but I think that this is something that we might break down from time to time. Maybe we get on once a month or something and talk about how you've created what you've created, because sponsorship is just one part of it. There's a whole other avenue that we can dive into. And I know that you have this awesome studio. We could even talk about that. So, but let's try and hash something out on, later on, and we'll figure that out. But where can we find you? Where's the best place to find Jay right now? Besides the HardParking podcast, which is everywhere you listen to podcasts?
Best places to find me. There's two. Instagram. I am always on Instagram. I run several pages. I run the One Auto Movement. But the easiest thing is the marquee NA2NSX or J Travels, which is JHAE_travels, and HardParking Violations Facebook page. And the reason why I throw that out there is because there's a lot of people on that page that don't care about cars. And it's because everything I do isn't necessarily about the actual product. It's about the people behind the product, the people behind the page. We have a lot of fun because, as you were saying earlier, HardParking podcast, The Other Side of the Wheel, is more car focused, but it's so high level. If you come to my podcast, all you care about is like the 10 models that are coming out and how to do how fuel injection works. I can't help you because I don't care. I just want my car to work.
Right.
But if you're curious about little things, then come to the podcast.
Yep. Well, it's a great podcast. One of the best sounds I've heard out of any podcast that I listen to. Produced all by Jay and edited all by Jay. So if you get a chance, check it out. HardParking Podcast. Check us out on One Drink Wednesday. Jay, it's great having you. Thanks again for hanging out for some time.
Thanks, Wes.
All right, everyone. Well, that's the end of the show. Until next time, I challenge you to find the shape of your success.
Dun, 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 dun.